Okay, so hello, Hajara Alamodi. Thank you so much for being here with the students at Loyola University Chicago. Um, for the students, I'm going to go on ahead and read your bio in your own words. Hajara Alamodi is the Chief Project Officer at Techlogica Corporation, a software and security services company. She has done many projects in software implementation, integration, business continuity, disaster recovery, service delivery, etc. She's also a real estate developer and she does residential infrastructure and commercial projects. She sees many project managers and organizations who don't understand the basic best practices of project management. And as an entrepreneur working in the investment world, I see the same problem with many founders. She teaches them the project management skills they need to know in order to develop their ideas and monetize them. And it is important for founders to know about project management skills. She works in a projectized manner because it is cost effective and helps her get higher return on investments from her ventures. Project management is relevant to all parts of life. And I have to agree with that last statement. The more I learned about project management, the more I realized how critical it was in every aspect. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, good. So what I'm going to do is I have a list of questions that I'm going to challenge you and ask you with. And then at the end, I will also ask if there's any other last words of encouragement that you could offer us as we learn about project management in this particular course. All right, so first of all, when creating a project charter, what are the key components necessary to start a traditional or waterfall project off correctly? And can you give some examples?
Yes. So project charters are probably the most important element of starting a project. Now, if you look at this from the PMI's perspective, now PMI doesn't even consider a project to be a project if there is a charter missing. And charters are important for various reasons. Now, the first thing is that project charters are formed by the organization. They're created by somebody high in the leadership over there at the organization. They're the ones creating the charter, not the project managers. Now, what's the most important thing that I think that charters do for projects is they announce to the entire organization that there's a project happening, okay? And they talk about the commitment from the stakeholder community at the organization for that project. So just, having that announced to everybody gets everyone on the same page and helps them understand what this project is, because that stuff is going to be there in the charter too. How this project is going to help the organization, how it's going to help the stakeholders. The other most important thing that is in the charter is the project manager's designation. So project manager's name, what title they may hold for the project, and the responsibilities that they're going to have on the project. Those things are clearly defined in the charter. So that helps everyone else also understand what level of authority this project manager is going to have on that project. And it helps the project manager run the project more successfully. If you think about it for a second, the role of a project manager is pretty unique. A lot of time, these project managers come into an organization as a contractor, as a consultant, somebody, from the outside. And now they are supposed to do this project. They're supposed to manage a team, and they are supposed to make sure that the team does the work and creates the right product. But what happens at the same time is a lot of these team members tend to be people from all the different departments within that organization. So people who are actually contributing time to the project, but are actually, they have another job at the company too. Now, these people, they report to other managers. So they have their own department leads that they report to. So project managers are typically not the ones they report to. So project managers in those situations do not have that same level of authority over these team members. So just, having a charter coming from the organization tells the team members that this is a project manager who's responsible for doing this project, and the organization has hired this project manager to the project. So it just makes our job as a project manager much more easy. Otherwise, it gets a little tricky with how you manage the team. So I think from my experience, that is the most important thing I have seen, that when the organization takes the time and effort, not everybody does it, but they should. When they create a charter, it really helps the project manager better manage and successfully complete the project. And by announcing that, the organization is committed to this project, it helps to get their stakeholder community ready and supportive of the project. So you're going to see and face a lot less resistance from the stakeholder community when you have a charter like that coming in.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. And you're right. Now that you're talking about it like that, yes, that project charter, it does provide the authority that you need to move forward.
Yeah.
And even if the people do not answer to you, in essence, it's like the proxy authority, or at least it gives you the proxy authority to do the project. Okay, so one of the key components of a project is the deliverable. Can you explain and give examples of the need to clearly define what the deliverable is and how you know you've delivered it?
All right, so our projects are all about the deliverable. There is always a deliverable, right? I mean, that's why we do a project. And now it can be in all kinds of shapes and forms. It can be, something which is like a physical product. It could be a service, or it could be just even an upgrade to an existing application. The way you come out with the right deliverable is by doing very, very thorough requirements gathering. Now, this is so important. Now, this was one thing that was actually carried out by project managers in the past. The project managers were the one gathering the requirements to understand, what is this new product like, how it's supposed to work, what is the customer asking for. So the project manager used to do all of those things, but the project managers are facilitators. They are there to make sure that everything is running the right way. Project is moving as per the plan, but they're not really the technical experts, so to speak. They're not the one with the technical expertise and understanding of the product and its functionalities. So projects used to be a lot less successful in terms of building the right deliverables, because there was a lack of proper requirements and understanding of the requirements for that product. So now we're bringing in business analysts. Now these business analysts tend to be the experts around that product. They tend to be the people who understand the different functionalities of that product. And we are running a lot of meetings with these business analysts in our projects in the early days of the project itself, and doing as much of requirements gathering as we possibly can for the product to make sure that we understand exactly, to the T, what are the requirements that this customer has, this organization has, and what do they need from this project? What do they need from this product? They get to explain what their current processes are like. They get to explain, how they're doing things right now. They talk about, all the different problems they're running into. They talk about the different functionalities they need as a requirement. So they explain and they share kind of their story in those meetings, in those requirements gathering meetings. And the business analyst asks them all kinds of questions about, about their current processes, but also, what the BA tries to do in these meetings is also figure out, is there a workaround here? Do they even need a product like that? So that's another thing we project managers need to make sure that this discussion happens in those meetings, is figure out if there is still a workaround that is present at the organization. Maybe there is. Maybe, they just don't know about it, but we can figure that out. And if there is a workaround, do they really need that product? Do we really need to do this project? So this is in the interest of the organization. This is in the interest of, what they get as a return from the project. If there is a workaround, and if it's a good workaround and they can get the work done because of it, then there may not be a need of a product itself here. So that's one of the other questions we ask in these meetings. But the requirements gathering is the key to the success of having the right deliverable, the right product here. We create a document. So when we talk in terms of, the PMBOK guide or, what PMI proposes, the PMBOK talks about, this project charter having these high-level requirements in there. So the charter talks about, what our project is going to do, what is this product we're building, how is this organization going to use this product, but at a very high level. When we enter a project as a project manager and have these sessions and these meetings, we come out of those meetings with something called a scope statement. It's a very, very important document that exists in our projects and in our project plans, the scope statement. And the scope statement can only be truly completely formed if you have done the requirements gathering properly, because the scope statement is going to take that information in the charter about the product and really define it much more clearly. So what it does, the scope statement is so important and interesting because it not only talks about what are all the different requirements for this product, what are all the different functionalities it should carry because the organization needs it, because the customer needs it, but it also talks about what is out of scope for this project. What is that gray area? So sort of defining that gray area, and that's where we get lost a lot of time, right? We don't know, where do we stop with our scope formation? Where is it now out of the project work? So the scope statement, if you have that in your project, if you have that as part of the plan, and you've done this correctly, it's going to help the team understand what is out of scope for this project. I'll tell you an example here of, what went wrong and kind of show you the importance of these requirement gathering sessions. I was once doing a Oracle mobile supply chain application project for a client. And these guys, they had their warehouses, and the way their warehouses kind of functioned was pretty old school. So everything was really manual. So, the organization decided to get them the RF scan guns and have the Oracle applications installed on those scan guns so that they can, really integrate with the rest of the organization. So they were very excited because, it was something that they were asking for a long time, and now finally the organization was planning to do it. So when I went into this project and we started doing these requirements gathering sessions, now these guys used to, they had their warehouses in different locations, and we used to work out of the main office, the main branch. So they would come for these meetings every day or, a couple times a week. And they would come and talk about what is their current process like, how do they get the work done in the warehouses, what is the need that they have, what changes do they want to see, how is this new application supposed to be helping them. So, but they used to talk about these things, but we didn't do, or rather I should say I didn't do a very good job of facilitating these sessions, because even though I had a BA supporting my project here, the requirements gathering wasn't done fully. So from the initial requirements gathering, what we understood as a team was that this client, this stakeholder community, is only in need of a vanilla application. So, if you were to get something and just, kind of install it, get it ready, something right out of the box, that should be enough. They'd be good to go. And with that understanding, we started creating and building the application for these guys. And comes the testing time when we started, gathering those test cases and trying to build test scenarios so that they can test out the application. And they started presenting their data and, kind of helping us build those scenarios and formats. And that's when we realized that actually the way they were doing some of these processes was actually very complex. It was much complex than what the application can offer to them. So it means that the application needed heavy customization to make it work for these guys. So everything came to a halt there, because whatever we were working for up to that point, it was just a waste of time. I mean, it wasn't going to serve this customer. So right back to the blackboard again, we went back to the meetings again, started doing the requirements gathering again, trying to figure out, what did we miss and how did we miss it? And from that, we understood that, yeah, this client is going to need an application for sure. And this is the first time that they're getting something like this, but they need it very heavily customized. A vanilla application was not going to work for this warehouse department. And so this was like a good, 3 months into the project. And initially, our estimate was that the project's going to take about maybe 6 months, 5 months, I think. And the initial cost of that project was about $2 million. So that's what the customer would need to pay for the project. But now, after getting all these new requirements and figuring out that there's going to be customization work here, the project now has a new timeline. It's going to take about a good 9 to 10 months to finish. And the budget was hit really bad with this one because we had to re-estimate everything around that project work. And now the new budget was about $9.5 million. So you can imagine that the client wasn't very pleased with that. And there were a lot of meetings. And in fact, they actually wanted to shut down the project itself. They didn't want to pay so much money for this. But there was so much pressure from the warehouse department on the management that they actually had to continue with the project. But this is just, an example to kind of show to you that requirements gathering is very critical to the success of a project and building that right deliverable. If you don't do that right, then you're not going to have the right product. You're going to build something from that project, but it's not going to be the right one. It's not going to serve the needs.
Okay, so wow, that was a big, that was a good example. Let's just say that.
I know it doesn't really show the best side of my work, but it's one of those lessons I learned.
Yes, well, you see, but I think that we learn so much from experience, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're probably a lot better because of that experience, right?
Absolutely.
It's always a learning curve for us in every single thing we do. So, no, but I agree. I think that is thank you very much for sharing that, because that was a sincere example that shows us the criticality of the requirements of scoping this project, understanding what's in scope, what's out of scope, and to very clearly list the requirement and then confirm back, is this really what you're looking for? Do you really need this, right?
Yeah.
And so going back and I think sometimes we stop because we think that maybe we're being too detailed, or we're going to be bothersome, or we assume a lot. I'm sure this is really what they meant. But going into the details, things fail if it doesn't work, if you don't have that information for sure. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask the next question. Okay, so once the project has been initiated, what does it mean to monitor and control your project?
So monitoring and controlling a project is more of an ongoing thing. Now, be it a waterfall project, the traditional projects that we typically do, or the newer formats, which is one of those agile projects. But monitoring and controlling is an ongoing process. Now, you can make this easy on yourself as a project manager if you have done the requirements gathering correctly. So if you have done that properly, you're going to face a lot less problems and hurdles in the project. You're going to see a lot less risks in the project. So that's very important, I think. And the other thing that I would recommend when it comes to monitoring and controlling the project properly is doing frequent checks. So you're going to take your project plans, you're going to take the baseline from the project plans, the scope baseline, the schedule, the cost baseline, and you're going to look at your current information, the raw data and the evaluated data from the project, and you'll try to compare the two. And you want to do this often. You want to do it, not only have a plan for how often and when you're going to do this comparison, but also try to do it at every turn of events, at every new situation, at every new risk being identified, at each time response strategy is implemented for a risk. You want to take out those baselines as a project manager, and you want to compare and see what was the original plan for this project, and where is it heading? What does that future trend of the project look like based on what has happened in the project so far? So that is going to be really, really important when it comes to doing proper monitoring and controlling, frequent evaluations, have frequent retrospective meetings with your team, with your stakeholders as well. Nowadays, our stakeholders are a more prominent and important part of project work. They are actually there with us in a lot of the decision making. So they're not considered to be just, the customer who gets that product and just gives us a feedback saying whether this is a good or a bad product, but they're actually helping us build that product properly, accurately. So stakeholders are really more actively involved in doing projects these days. So having those retrospective meetings with the stakeholders, with your team members, all of those things are going to help you better manage your project, minimize the risks that happen in your project, and make sure that everything gets successfully completed on time and within schedule.
Okay, can you give an example about that monitoring and controlling? So, I mean, Steve, so you're doing these schedules and you're comparing to baseline. And then what happens if you see that it's not going according to plan? That the product that's being developed or the process that's being developed is kind of going away from what you had scoped out, what the requirements are. How do you pull it back?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, and it actually leads us to another part of our project work, which is your change control. So we have in our formal project management, we have a whole process laid out for how to do change management and change control. So the change control process is what you're going to have to implement when you see that there are problems or your project is kind of deviating away from the baseline. You're going to first try to figure out why this is happening. So it may not be the entire project. Obviously, if it is, then it's a more serious problem here, and you're too late to this process. But it's usually one or the other areas of the project. Maybe your budget, right? Maybe you're spending more than you were supposed to. So that's what you're seeing from the baseline comparison. Or maybe, certain activities are running behind here. So you want to first figure out with your team members. So that's very important. So these are not decisions a project manager just makes on their own. They're always in consultation with the team, with the experts from the team. The subject matter experts are very actively involved in these decisions. So you're going to talk to them. You're going to try to figure out why is this happening in our project? Why are we running behind? Why are certain activities being not completed on time as per the schedule? Or why do we end up spending more than we have to on certain activities? So try to figure that out first. Maybe, the team is incorporating more enhancements into the project, which is actually not part of the original project scope. So that happens a lot. And, it really depends on the organization and, how well they understand the project management techniques. A lot of organizations would just rather, have you incorporate and add all these additional enhancements and functionalities because, you're just doing the project, so might as well just do whatever we need to do and not try to have to worry about that later. So that's one approach that some organizations take, but that's going to have an impact on your project work. That's going to have an impact on the schedule, and that is going to have an impact on your budgets as well. But you have to figure that out first. And then if you think that it is because of a certain issue or certain risk or a certain error or a problem you're seeing in your project, then you have to think about a solution for that with your team again. And you are trying to come up with a solution, put that information in a change request, send it across to the change control board, let them take a look at it, and then you guys make a decision as to how do we correct that situation so that our project can come back to the baseline, so that we get back on track. So the change control process comes into play in our traditional waterfall projects. And that's how we bring back our project and project work to the schedule, to the original plan we had set out with.
Okay, so in the traditional project, all of that planning makes the difference. It's very necessary. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, planning is very necessary. And it is something that you want to do In fact, planning takes a lot of time. If you think about it, plans are not just formed, in one day or even 1 week. Sometimes it takes, depending on how complex the projects are, it can take a good couple months to form those plans. But doing those plans correctly, building the right baselines, that is all very important if you want to make sure that you don't have problems down the line and you don't see risks and see budget impacts and schedule impacts.
Okay, and part of that planning, as you were talking earlier, is the scoping and getting the requirements down, because that's all part of that's not the initiating, because the initiating is just their project charter and your stakeholder identification. And then planning includes all of that extra detail, all those meetings
Yeah.
we talked about with the business analysts,
Yeah.
all the analysts and stuff. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of people think that projects plans are done way before the team starts the work or way before the team joins, but actually your team members are already there with you when you do the plans, because project managers don't create the plans by themselves. It is the entire team doing this. So when you do the scope statement, you need the business analyst for those meetings to define those requirements. The scope baseline, how is that formed? The scope baseline is done, well, actually it has 3 parts to it. It has the scope statement, it has the work breakdown structure in it, and a dictionary for that work breakdown structure. And what is that work breakdown structure? It is nothing but a breakdown of the project plan. It's more visual. It creates a chart. That's what it is. It's a chart. It's a hierarchy chart. But who's doing it? It's the team. It's not the project manager with the software like Microsoft Projects and building that, but it is actually the team doing it. And there are some very good reasons behind why it's supposed to be done by the team and how it becomes part of that planning process itself. It just helps the team build a lot more understanding, get rid of a lot of confusion, and really helps them build that coordination and collaboration among themselves when they're doing the work. Now they will understand, how all the different parts kind of connect together and how their part of the project work is perhaps dependent on another team member's work. So it helps build that collaboration.
Well, the students in the class are going to do their own work breakdown structure, and they're going to do a schedule of the Gantt chart. So thank you so much for those words, because they can anticipate what they're going to be doing a little bit. All right, so I had mentioned that the listing your stakeholders is part of the initiation phase, but then throughout the project, you have to interact and work with your stakeholders. So can you give some examples about how you identify and then manage your stakeholders throughout a project?
Yeah. Stakeholders management, it's growing in importance because now organizations understand the value of stakeholder cooperation and engagement in projects. They understand, how value enhances when stakeholders are a part of that project work and they're participating in the decision making. They have feedback to give. So stakeholder management is actually taking a lot of it's gaining a lot more importance, and project managers are kind of spending more and more time doing stakeholder management. Now, the first thing when you go in to do a project, how do you identify your stakeholders, right? Some names are already the big ones, the more prominent stakeholders. Their names can be present in the project charter. So the sponsor has created that charter, and some names are already there. So those are your stakeholders to connect with. And then you want to take help of the project sponsor. The project sponsor is usually a stakeholder too, because they're part of the organization. And they're usually somebody who's senior in the organization, somebody who's been with the organization for many years. So they know the different departments, they know the different people. So the project sponsor is actually your best person to go to, take that help, and he or she can help you and get you introduced to all the other prominent stakeholders, the department leads, all the different people who are connected with this project or may be impacted by the project. So the stakeholder, the sponsor will do that for you. The sponsor is always considered to be your supportive stakeholder or the positive stakeholder. They're always on your side, and they want to help you to make that project a success. So take that help from the project sponsor. They'll help you and they'll introduce you to the right stakeholders at that organization. And then, you kind of have to learn. So it takes a little bit of time as well to identify all the other stakeholders. So the sponsor is going to introduce you to most of the big ones. So the department leads, the managers, those kind of people. But what about the other employees of the organization, people who still use that product or will use that product? So those leads can then introduce to all of these other people, all the people within their department, perhaps, who are going to be related to that product, maybe using that product down the line. So that's how you kind of, connect with all of the different people. But the key is to start off with somebody within the organization who knows the organization and the stakeholder community there. And then you take it, once you have that figured out, then you already kind of know, who's your supportive stakeholder and who is maybe not so supportive of this project because of the various reasons. And those are the ones you want to focus on as a project manager, especially if these guys have that power, the authority level at the organization, they can impact your projects. So in the good way or the bad way, they can have, some influence on your project. So you want to work with them. You want to figure out, why they are against the project, or what do they see as a problem here. Try to understand their reasons and try to, help them understand how the project may be a better help to them, how, it may improve things for their organization, for their department, for themselves itself. But it's something that you'll have to work at. And it's important. Project managers should pay that attention to, who the stakeholders are and who are the unsupportive stakeholders, more importantly.
Okay, so, it sounds, the more you talk, the more it sounds that project management is all about talking.
Oh, yeah. I say that to all my students all the time. I'm like, you got to be a people person if you want to be a project manager, because, that's what we do most of our time during the day. We're just, in meetings, we're talking to people, we're running meetings, we're facilitating sessions, but, we're surrounded by people all the time.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's for sure. All right. So, so I want to ask you, okay. So I want to ask you about the difference between a traditional project and an agile project. Now, before we started recording, you had mentioned some things, and so I want to try and get you to repeat all of the great stuff you said to me
Okay.
before this. But we are in healthcare. We're going to do a traditional project, and that's step by step. We start, we plan, we execute, monitor, control, and close. But Agile is really the way of a lot of modern industries. So can you just explain to us so that we understand a little bit better when somebody says an Agile project versus a traditional or waterfall project, what's that difference?
Right. So Waterfall has always been in project management. Waterfall was used even before, we had defined project management techniques. The pyramids, these are some of the great projects across the world, right? The Great Wall of China. These were all, waterfall projects. They didn't have the word waterfall maybe back then, but these were done in a step-by-step manner. A lot of the projects in the construction industry, even today, are waterfall projects because things need to be done in a step-by-step manner, because you're not going to be able to build the floors and the rooms if you don't have the foundation laid out, right? So it's logical for these industries. Waterfall works because they need to do things in a very step-by-step manner, and they need to do it most of the time. They need to do it, in one go. So it's got to be one foundation that's laid one time. You're not going to do it in like parts, or you're not going to break down that scope and do it in maybe multiple iterations. That's not possible in these projects. Now, the Agile project is a complete opposite to the Waterfall project. Now, in Waterfall, we do things in one go, in a step-by-step manner, but in Agile, we do things in repetitions, which we call as iterations, and we do the scope formation in increments. So we're not building the whole scope in one go, but we are actually breaking down the scope into smaller parts, into smaller components, and we're trying to build one part after the other over the iterations. So what happens is, say for example, you have a 3-month project, which you're planning to do in a waterfall method. You're going to use a waterfall methodology, and you're going to do the planning once, you're going to do the execution or the implementation once, you're going to have some testing, but that's just going to be a one-time thing again. You're going to have a formal closing at the end, and that's when you hand over the product to the customer. Now, take that same project and say you're trying to do it in an agile way, okay? Now, what's going to happen here now with that project is, first, you're going to take that time period, the timeline of 3 months, break it down into iterations. But before that, what you're going to do is you're going to look at the scope of the project. What is this product we're building here? Why are we building it? What requirements it is supposed to have? We're going to make a product backlog, have those requirements in there. And then we think about with the team, and the stakeholder community is also very, very closely interacting in Agile projects. So they're very much a part of all these discussions. But we figure out a plan for how much time it might take. So in the sense, how many iterations we're going to have to do. Now, why is it that we make use of an iteration? Iterations are nothing but the time box period. So it can be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks is an average. We make use of iterations in Agile projects because our goal here with Agile projects is always to build a functionality as soon as we can, as soon as possible, and deliver it to the customer. So in Agile projects, we are trying to deliver value to the customer as soon as possible. Now compare that to our waterfall projects, where the customer would have to wait for 3 months before they get to use the product. But in Agile projects, we are not going to be able to obviously give the whole product in one iteration in 2 weeks, but we are going to give them one functionality, complete one functionality, and give it to them. And then ask them, try this, use this, give us a feedback. Let us know what you think. Are you able to incorporate this in your work? And they are going to use it. They're going to try it. They're going to give us a feedback, whether they like it or not. If they like it, then it very much becomes a part of their work from that day onwards. They don't have to wait for a, like a formal delivery at the end of the project. It's not theirs, and they get to use it from that day. But if they don't like it, they give us a feedback. Or perhaps they like it, but they want to tweak into it some of the other functionalities, other requirements. They give us a feedback. We take that, we change that scope now. We change the scope of the product, the rest of the product. We change the requirements for that product, and then we build those over the next iterations. And this continues. This goes on and on. So it's a repetition. It's going to happen every 2 weeks. The customer takes it, gives us a feedback, we modify the next requirement, and we build that. So what happens in Agile, and because of this layout, it helps us give back value to the customer as soon as possible, not having to wait for 3 months, right? And it helps us build the right product. It helps us build a product that's practical. It helps us build a product that's going to be used by that customer, that's going to give value to the customer, to the organization. So Agile projects are actually quite successful if you think about it, because there is a lot of risk minimization that happens there because of that feedback, because of those retrospective meetings. Now, just like how I mentioned, and I want to bring this again because I think this is such a valuable lesson which helps students understand what's the difference between the Waterfall and Agile, and why did even Agile come about. Now, Agile, this was a problem for a lot of industries, IT in particular, that projects. So when the organization started with a requirement for a product, and there was a project done to do that, to build that requirement, the projects took so long to complete. It took so much time to build these products that by the time there was a product ready, the organization did not need it anymore. So they were kind of, past that point. They didn't need the product anymore. There was no more a requirement for that. In the aerospace industry, where they are building space rockets and all of that, some of the delays were like 10 years, 15 years. Can you imagine that? Coming back after 15 years and saying, all right, so we're done with this project, here's the product. And they were like, no, we don't need it. What product? So the projects were a failure, if you think about it. I mean, what good is the project if the customer doesn't get to use the product, if they don't need it anymore, they don't see the value in it. So this was a problem that a lot of project managers were facing, and they started having these meetings, all these different project managers from the different industries, to figure out, what do we do? How do we change this situation that we're dealing with? And that's when Agile came up. They were like, okay, let's try something different here. Let's break down stuff and see if we can do this another way and build a product, and that way still be able to deliver value faster, sooner to the customer. So the goal with Agile Projects is to build requirements or functionalities, product, now not the entire product, but even just pieces of that product, but deliver it to the customer as soon as possible. So Agile delivers value the soonest as compared to the Waterfall. So that's the biggest difference, and sort of the benefit of using our Agile project methodologies. And the Scrum, the Kanban, Scrum is very popular, the Kanban, and there are many others that actually belong to the Agile family. But this is basically the foundation of those methodologies, that they always have iterations, and they have got product development that happens in increments.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So one final question that I'm going to ask you, and this is a challenge that we see a lot in healthcare. So in healthcare, we do just the traditional projects, although I can definitely see a need for Agile as well now that you've explained it. But we do the traditional projects, and we do them for 3 months, 6 months. We get done, and then within a few weeks or a few months, nobody's doing the new process or using the new product, the deliverable. Everybody's gone back to the old way, the old workarounds. And so we did all of this work, and it didn't stick. So what does project management say, and what can project management offer us to try and stop the backslide after we get a project?
Yeah. That is a very good question, because it is a problem that is seen across many industries. And I think the number one reason why we see, well, actually, there are two reasons that I can think of why we have this problem and how we can possibly avoid it. But I think the more important reason is that when organizations are, finalizing projects, when they decide to do a project, a lot of time what happens is they don't take the feedback from their larger stakeholder community. So, usually it's the senior management who decides on, what projects to happen in a year and all. But there needs to be more feedback incorporation from the lower level managers, the department leads, those kind of people, the subject matter experts, to better understand, whether this product is really required at the organization. What do they need to understand about the product, and what do they need to understand about how that process is being carried out at the moment at the organization by all the different people, the different employees who get to do it. So that feedback is missing a lot in those decision-making processes, and that's why we see all these products being built that actually do not have such a value to give back to the organization. I mean, people were not waiting for a product like that. So that's the thing. They were getting the work done just fine, and they didn't feel the need to have something like this to be able to complete their work successfully. So, for them, it becomes just a hassle. For them, it's like, why do I have to bother with using some other process now? Just, it's just dragging my work. It's more paperwork, more processes to follow. So that is the reason why we see that people, even after, giving them a product functionality like that, they kind of, tend to kind of steer away from that product, because for them it's just additional work. It's not really going to help them finish that task much sooner or in a better way, more properly, accurately, but it's just an additional task for them to take care of. So the feedback incorporation needs to happen at the senior management when they are doing those decisions about what product they need to build, what projects they need to do. And then the other reason why we see this happen in our organizations is because when the employees haven't been trained properly. So trained not only, in how to use that product, how to use that service, that software, that functionality, but also they haven't really been talked to about this product. They don't understand the larger benefits of using this product. And that happens in a lot of departments. Only the managers really understand. Maybe they haven't, so the communication gap is there. They haven't done that discussion. They haven't had a meeting with their team. So not everybody fully understands what is this product about, why we have something like this being built at the organization, how it's going to help them, how is it going to help my work. So when there is that lack of understanding, you won't see that active usage of the product. You won't see that utilization of that service within the department among the stakeholders. So organizations need to pay attention to this. So this is, this is how you solve it. Organizations need to do this on their own. They need to bring in their managers and help their departments and everybody understand what this product is, how it's going to help them, how they need to make use of it, how it's going to benefit them in their work. So that needs to be done by the organization. And then project managers also during the projects need to bring in the change agents, the change managers much early on in the projects. Now, before, the practice was that a change manager would come really at the very end of the project when there was actually going to be a transition now. That's when they would come in, just hurry up with some training. They would, do the train the trainer. They would create some catalogs for the product, for how to use it, some manuals, and that was just about it. But they never had a chance to really evaluate and understand, who's the stakeholder community, what level of training do they need? Not everybody needs the same level of training. So what level of training do they need? How intense does it have to be? Are these people ready for this product mentally? Are they accepting that product? So the change manager can do these things. So the sooner they start off in the project, that they get that time to do the observation. So now we're calling in these change managers at the very beginning of the project, just right after a project manager joins the project, around the time the business analyst comes in to do the requirements gathering, change managers are coming in too. They become part of those meetings. But what they do is they kind of sit at the back in the room and they're just kind of analyzing everybody. What's that communication happening here? How are these people explaining things? What is their approach and response to this the project? How is their participation level? So the change the change manager is trying to understand what is the readiness, right? Well, how ready are these stakeholders to use this product? How willing are they to use this product? And then they come up with a strategy for how to get this team ready. So when you have resistance from your stakeholders towards your project, that means you need to have a lot more talking and training being done to get them ready to accept the product, to use it correctly, and to incorporate it into their work. So just handing over a product at the very end and calling it as a successful project is not done, because it's not successful if your stakeholders don't get to use the product or don't understand how to use it or don't want to use it. So those are all things we try to change in our projects, the perception of the stakeholders, their attitude towards that project.
Okay, so that's well, I think you're absolutely right on that, because we're missing value, right? If we don't, if they don't use that project or that product deliver. All right, so well, I just want to thank you very much for all of your time. Before you go, I would like to ask you: is there any words of advice you have for our dietetic students and our nursing students as they embark on, I don't know, learning project management and actually trying to be able to use it in their field? Any words of advice for us?
Yeah, just how we started this whole conversation, saying that project management is something that's very applicable to all parts of our lives. So it's not just, our professions, but in our everyday, lives, just around our houses and, just the daily tasks we have to handle. Those are all, different projects, if you think about it. Those are all, they can be considered to be projects a lot of times. So you want to start, what you're learning, you will probably want to start implementing there as soon as you can. So that kind of helps you understand, how these processes play out. And when you do these projects, when you're actually running a project, maybe as a dietitian, then you want to also pay attention to a couple of things to make them a success. You want to understand your stakeholders. You want to work very actively with them. You want to gather your requirements properly. So building that scope statement, creating those scope requirements, the requirement documentation, that is a key to having the right product from the customer. And you want to be a very good risk manager in your project. So sometimes we bring risk managers if we have very complex and very sensitive projects, but project managers, I truly believe this, that project managers have to be risk managers too. They have to do active risk management in the projects to keep an eye on things. And risk management is a very ongoing process. It starts on day one and it ends on the last day of the project. So you got to be really into risk management to keep an eye on, what's changing in your project. And projects do have a lot of moving parts. So what's changing? How are situations changing? How is that risk list? You have a risk register with your identified risk. How is that changing? Sometimes we make a resolution in order to resolve a risk, and that can create other kinds of risk too. So that happens quite often in projects. So how is that happening? You want to keep an eye on these things if you want to make your projects a success. Project managers, remember, they're not the technical experts when it comes to running projects. They are the facilitators. They're ones responsible for making sure that projects happen as a plan, according to a plan, on time, and everybody's doing their part. And try to actively manage and engage these different parts. But it is, you always have a technical team, you have that subject matter expert, and you should always use their help. You should always get them to, take part in the decision making. And that's how you do these successful projects.
Wow. Well, okay, so you have just given us a ton of information, Hajara. I really thank you so much. All your time here, everything that you've said, I think you have made a big difference for us in our class. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. So thanks for the opportunity.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.